Good evening, it's 2200 UTC on this Sunday the 10th of November, 3305. I'm your host Jeff Ryan and welcome to the Prismatic Congress. The Prismatic Congress is a broadcast by the Prismatic Imperium based in Cubio, an active player group that makes up part of the Ashling Duval community and specializing in role-playing. First, general game news. Golconda. 5 days ago, Malik VR on Twitch discovered a new generation ship, the Golconda. Unlike all previous generation ships, this one has people still alive on it. But there's a problem because there's a disease running rampant aboard the ship, which has forced this proud vessel's captain to signal for assistance. In response, a new initiative has been set up as both the Federation and the Empire prepare to support the Golconda for their own ends. Phase 1, which started 2 days ago, sees pilots treating the illness, and if successful, we'll move to Phase 2 with the Federation and the Empire competing to see who can help the colonists. Phase 2 starts on the 18th of November, next Monday. If the Empire succeeds, the Golconda's people will be moved to a planet-side Imperial home. And if the Federation wins, they'll be given an outpost to continue their unique space-bound culture. And that is the main news for this week. Now on to branch news with from Vigor with Chief Kistler.
Thank you. So for the branch of Vigor news, as I have already announced in the last episode, we have our PvP ship-launched fighter event, and I have closed the vote for the date right now, or today, and the final date will be next Saturday, so November 16th, and the time will be 2000 UTC. That will be 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific time, and 2100 Middle European time, Central European time. So far, I have 7 people registered as participants. If you are interested and available at that date, please shoot me a note. That makes it easier to plan what exactly we can do in terms of game modes and teams and whatnot. Furthermore, in terms of BGS, I can only be happy to say that everything continues to be stable, and we're on a good course in terms of fortifying the Adamantine Union. We have another expansion going through and are on a break from our chain of expansions by now, and making sure that our existing systems stay healthy and looking into what we can add to that. Last but not least, it might be worth to mention the roleplay again, but that might also be part of the Mind news in a moment. But nevertheless, if you are interested in this, I recommend you check up on the roleplay, because a lot of things have happened within the branch of Vigor mostly, and the infiltration arc there has continued quite a bit and is about to close a loop with the Benjamin arc. So I really love how this is developed and how Kevin and me especially work to tie this together now. And that's it for the branch of Vigor this week. I hope I see everyone who is interested at the event next week. And now over to the branch of Sight with Lord Headmaster Takaron.
If you haven't registered me for this event, please do so, because I really like to shoot stuff. Well. 2 weeks after our Great Site expedition, I'm sitting here in my office looking at a lot of beautiful pictures from that event. Rewards have already been distributed, and a lot of you have already taken that diamonds and purchased some new items. But I do hope you didn't purchase these pesky trumbles, because they are right everywhere now. A few students in the university have even claimed they are under their bed. However, the important news. Everyone inside, is currently looking at the Golconda. That's a really interesting find, because it's the first generation ship that's still inhabited. So I've already sent one of my scouts, Professor Bright Phoenix, there. He will make a report of the overall situation very soon. The branch of Sight is interested in helping with that initiative to make sure that these refugees will come to the Imperial side, the good side. Other than that, for the next weeks and months, I plan to focus on new roleplay stories happening in the Emerald University. Together with my Vice Headmaster, this will hopefully be no problem at all. This has been everything from the branch of Sight. Let's get to the mind news.
Hello again. Everything going on in Branch of Mind is always exciting. So, I hope everybody has enjoyed the Trumbull outbreak.
No.
Well, so that was an idea I had bounced off on Mystler some time ago, and when Halloween came around, I'm like, let's do this today. So, I was kind of excited about the feature. It was really fun to watch T's inventory fill up over time. So I think both of us were watching like every hour or so. And so
Indeed.
within about 24-hour period, they were just everywhere, which is about what I had expected. Um, Not everybody liked them, so there is now a way to get rid of them. It just decreases their spawn, um, and lowers it down to just the normal amount that you can own at once. So if you're still bombarded by all the trumbles and they're just covering your screen and your infestation is just um, to the point, unlike what Techron said, they don't just fill up under your bed. If you open your front door and all you see is trumbles falling out, I have a solution for you now. So the branch of mind is excited to have. What do we end up calling it, Mistler?
Regulator something?
Yeah, the regulator something. Just purchase that from your accessories, and I don't know if you have to equip it or not.
You do.
You do, so do equip that, and that will put the population back under control. I saw somebody gave Kadeen one somehow, so that was kind of exciting. Because it's like, well, she's on Kurt's ship, so I need to decide if Kurt has them too. And I decided maybe instead I'll just go ahead and start calling out their numbers. So that's what I did. Anyway, um, in addition to that, I have Ramirez has some help now working on the command token system. So Kurt's going to be running through numbers with her going forward. And so I'm glad that is progressing. Moving on from that, there's been a lot of roleplay development going on this week, so I'm pretty excited about the different things that are going on. Mistler already mentioned what's going on with his arc there in the Vigor branch, which is pretty exciting. I've been following that closely because it's actually pretty darn good. It makes me jealous. I have to really step up my RP game. And then there is the Kurt and Kadeen story, which is going to have some really interesting things that are tying back into the Spencer Isaac plot with the main event. So I don't know exactly where that's going to go because Kurt is leading the way in the dark, and there is a lot of things he could potentially discover out in the system that he's currently in. So it'll be exciting to see what choices he makes and who he ends up interacting with based on those choices. And then we have the Ben story. Ben has concluded his wilderness adventure and is now free to roam wherever he pleases. He probably won't reintegrate with society this week, but he can at least bump into Ramirez and start plotting how he can really complicate what's going on. So he's also in the dark, and I will be responding to his choices. So that will be exciting to see where that goes as well. And I think, unless I'm forgetting anything, I think that covers what I've been up to this week with the branch of mind. Back to Jeff.
Thank you. There's been a lot happening in the last since the last episode. First off, yes.
May I add something?
You may.
In the general news part,
Yeah.
you of course mentioned the Golconda, but I'd like to just put a note there that the previous Interstellar Initiative has of course ended, the Scourge, and
yeah, that would have been
I think it's
last week's episode.
noteworthy because we discussed this in a previous episode.
Yeah.
The result of that blight state. So blight is now actually a permanent state. It has popped up throughout several systems, and it's now confirmed that after, I think it is 14 days. I'm not sure if this is completely confirmed, but it's what I noticed in the pattern. And after 14 days of blight, if it is left untreated, it will actually turn into a famine state. And as far as I took it from the conclusion announcement, the blight state has a chance to trigger from any kind of food delivery. I don't know if it's food cartridges or what else counts towards that. But yes, blight is a real state now that can happen. And if left untreated, it will turn into famine. So that state is back now in the BGS.
14 days sounds suspiciously like 2 weeks to me.
Or a fortnight, even.
Yes.
Right. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. The discussion of this would have obviously happened in last week's episode, which we skipped because I was sick. But yeah, we did discuss it for a few weeks, and yeah, so it did come to an end. I think a lot of people were a little bit disappointed with the wind up, but I'm happy to see that. I'm not happy, but I'm happy to see that there is a continuing effect from that, which is this new blight state. I suspect a lot of people, especially BGS people, are not going to be happy with this because it means further complications into an already complicated system. But it's one of those things that maybe should have been there from the beginning. It's like a pre-famine state also, so that some famines don't come from nowhere. I mean, that's historically been the case anyway. Whereas, where if you have a famine, there's usually been something leading up to it, whether it's weather or whether it's a blight. I mean, a lot of games that deal with this kind of thing also have a blight state. It's a big thing in RimWorld. If your crops get blight, you're in a lot of trouble, especially if you don't have stores. So yeah, it's good to see that something came from it. I'm sure a lot of people are not going to be happy with what came from it, but yeah. So thank you for that. And you're absolutely right. That would have been something that we would have discussed last week, but obviously last week we wouldn't have had all the news about it that has come out of it since it ended. Anyway, back on track. So I always make some notes when the branches are giving their news so that I can go more into detail. And honestly, this is the largest. This is like a full half page of A4 of notes that I've got today. So the PvP event is coming up, and it's going to be with fighters, I believe, isn't it? That's what we discussed the first.
Exactly. I talked about it in the last episode.
Yeah, in the previous episode. Yep. So we'll get the PvP event coming up with fighters, so that people can just jump in, no fear of losing your ship or anything else. It means it's cheap to participate in, and should be a lot of fun for everybody. And like Techie, I'd encourage everyone who's around to take part. Also, if people are available or if they're not in the region, they can also maybe telepresence in if somebody's got an extra fighter bay on their ship. BGS is stable, fortifying. Expansions. We have another expansion that's gone through for AU.
I think since we last talked about it, there was one more expansion, yes, and now we've set an end to it to manage what we have instead of just randomly spreading even more further out.
Yeah, I mean, we do need to try and keep an eye because the AU space is already it's quite big. I mean,
We have
that
25
Maritime-
systems now.
Yeah, the Maritime Union has been very successful in
Mhm.
its expansion.
Hi, I can.
So, and also, I mean, that's also an encouragement to people who want to take part in BGS. We do the Prismatic Imperium's own BGS, our own BGS is about staying stable because we don't really want to expand beyond our sphere of influence because that would be a bad thing. And also for Ashling Deval, because we always have to remember the Prismatic Imperium is a system that if it knocked certain other states out, then or we took control of the wrong system, we could actually make some people in Ashling Deval's greater community upset. So we do like that to stay stable, but we do have a larger, friendlier BGS, and that can always need people that help manage it.
Absolutely.
Yep. So if anybody in the Prismatic Imperium is listening and they want to take part, BGS people are always looking for people to help. The role play. I've been missing the last week, so I haven't actually seen the latest developments, but I'm glad to see that it's continuing. I have to say, because of some certain issues that I had with certain aspects of the story early on, I was critical of some aspects of it, but I was never critical of the quality of it. And I'm glad to see that that's continued and that Ben and everybody involved has been doing a good job. And I've always heard good things, and it's always been one of those things that I've always liked to encourage is that players actually do roleplay. The only thing that I would always ask is the respect the canon, and if they have questions, then they can speak to us about sorting some of that out. But I'm glad to see that that's been sorted and it's continuing, and that people are having a lot of fun. And always remember, like the most interesting stories are the ones where there are a hard time. People have to pass through trials, and it's not all black and white, and that makes for a good and interesting story. And Ben has achieved that admirably. Moving on to site. We can come back to any of these points during discussion if anybody wants to. The site expedition. I think the photos are always like one of the most beautiful things to come out of any expedition.
Of course.
And there's been no. This is no exception. It was one of the big things in DW2 as well, and we had a regular photo competition. I think the only thing that Elite Dangerous is guilty of in this is like there's an overabundance of beauty in the game that people can stop looking. Oh no, another screenshot. But I mean, the universe is beautiful. I mean, astronomers make their living from this. They make their living from. Oh, that's not true. Astronomers don't make their living from this, but NASA do put out a lot of real photos about how beautiful the universe is, and that is wonderfully represented in the game, I think.
It's not just about science, it's also about filling your photo collection.
Yeah. But I do know that some people are like, oh no, another screenshot. But there is always, if you actually, it's like art. If you're into art, you're into art. You never have enough pictures. And with Elite Dangerous, even today, I mean, I've been playing this game since alpha. I've been playing this game since it was first released in any form in 2013, and this is now 6 years later almost. And we're coming up on 6 years since that, and I am still on a weekly basis at least. I still see a picture. I think, wow, that's awesome, and the game is really good for that. And Sites Expedition also produced some wonderful pictures from the people that took part. So the Golanda, sorry, the Golanda, the Golconda. I don't know. For me, Golconda, I always think Anaconda, and that's not fair. But
Yes, Golconda a
And my
word.
same thought that the first time, yeah.
I don't know. I've not actually looked into the etymology of it. Gall, throat, conda. I don't know. Snake. I don't know. I'm just inventing that. But I don't know.
Throat
what it's
snake. That's its new name.
throat snake. But yeah, I've not looked at the etymology of Golconda. Gola is in Italian throat. I know that much, but I don't know if that's getting. So I'm glad to see that we're following through with that. And when I first read about it, I thought that would be a nice site thing, but obviously we have the We have the initiative coming up, and I'm glad to see that the site has taken an official position to support the Empire.
Of course. I mean, it's the first generation ship with survivors on board. And
Yeah.
I've banned all of them. I've seen their stories and the gruesome happenings inside.
Mind will oppose.
What?
You go away. Go away.
It's the official. It's the official Imperial position. Remember,
I-
nothing Kevin says has to be taken literally until tomorrow because he said no sleep.
If
No.
I catch you, if
No,
I catch you showing them some
I
mind
do have
propaganda,
opinions,
you'll have
though.
a big problem.
Yeah,
I've been thinking this is something I've wanted to see in this game for years, and now that it's finally happened, I think we've hit an age in Elite Dangerous that's where these kind of things are now possible, and I think the ramifications have changed. So, but anyway, it's nice to see that there's like a happy potential story to this. That we're finally finding people. I'd love to hear more about the mystery within that. I want to know all of the details. There's just a lot of potential
I
drama.
really hope that they've got the details. I mean, they very often they do. Frontier developments know a lot more than we do, but I really hope in this case they've got the details to give us, and they give us it. I mean, there's a lot that this.
I mean,
this
you can
ship
make it. This is like
represents.
you can make a full TV show out of this.
Yeah, no, yeah, you could. But
I
yeah,
want to know what language do they speak now?
yeah, that's. I mean, I have seen some criticisms of how the Golconda has been handled so far, but I'm saving those for the discussion point of the show. But I'm glad to see that there's always a difference. The difference in me between Jeff Ryan the player and Jeff Ryan the character. Jeff Ryan the character supports the Empire, and if I was in the bubble, I would be supporting it. But Jeff Ryan the player, I respect more the Federation's stand on this, which is giving them an outpost so they can continue their spacefaring style of life that they've been accustomed to. And I personally think I think that's the right way to do it. Obviously, my character doesn't agree with me, but
Yeah, it'd be a good way to keep them contained, right? Federation.
Yeah. So that's another consideration. The Trumbull thing that was genius. I have to say. I played the original game back in the day, and I absolutely remember. And we're talking like late '80s, early '90s, and I was just a kid. Like, I don't know how many people know how this comes about in the game, but when you're playing Elite, the first game, when you hit your first 5,000 credits, you get like and this was in the Commodore 64 version. I don't know if it was in other versions because all the versions, different versions of Elite had different things to them. And the Commodore 64 version of Elite had the Trumbles, and it had missions that could be given to you. There were like 3 different missions that you could do in the whole game. And this was like when you hit your first 5,000 credits, a salesman would appear who would offer to sell you this very rare item. And if you bought it, that was basically the end of your game. There were ways out of it, but most of us, I mean, there was no internet back then. We couldn't like Google for help. And basically your ship was overrun by Trumbles, and you had to go back. I mean, fortunately, I always had an earlier save, and the way that the save system was set up, it was like you were continuously. I mean, I had like hundreds of saves, and it did it automatically. So when I actually had when they first started multiplying, I was really happy. I thought, oh wow, I'm going to make all this money. The way out of it that I came across much later when the internet came in is you're supposed to burn up your ship. You're supposed to go fuel scoop, which was a really dangerous thing that almost nobody did in the original game. You could do it, but it was not easy. And if you fuel scooped, you would burn up the Trumbles, which was the way out of it. So I was really happy to see that nod to the original game in Prismatic Imperium storyline. I completely understand why some people would not like it, because I remember how much I didn't like it at the time. Later, I appreciate, even like 2 days later, I appreciated it. But at the time, my ship was being overrun by these monsters. It was, I mean, obviously, it's that itself is a nod to the famous Tribble episode of the original Star Trek. So it's nice to see that continuation. So the original Star Trek had it, then Elite had the nod to it, and then we had the nod to that original episode. So this is actually like a third generation nod to the original Star Trek episode. So I was really glad to see that play out. So we also have some new roleplay stories coming from. I would actually like to know more about this. I got name dropped in there, but I'd like to know more about what's going on there.
You gotta read.
Yeah. No, but I don't think I've been told. No, sorry, I'm not talking about from you, Kevin. I'm talking about from Techie. Techie wants to do some roleplay stuff with Sight.
Yeah, there are some stories I have planned for, but they're still far away from being completed, so I need the next weeks to write them.
Okay.
And I need your help,
Yeah,
Mr.
well,
English teacher.
I need to see something before I can help with it. So I'm
No
looking forward to
problem.
that.
Scripts are ready.
Okay, cool. Ben's finished wandering around. That's good to know. I'm looking forward to him rejoining. Is there a possible plot point where he actually rejoins where his character and his player rejoin and he rejoins the High Council, or is that something that?
This question is so funny because you haven't read the roleplay.
Yeah.
You should totally read it.
I'm glad I admitted that like right from the get go and didn't try to kind of wing it, because I knew I'd be caught out. So there is an answer to that in the roleplay.
Yeah, above and beyond.
Oh dear. Oh no.
It might be a very quiet high council for him to join.
Is he going to kill us all? Well, silence. That's worrying.
Yeah, you'll just have to read it.
Yep.
Oh no. Oh no. Kurt and Kading's story. Is that reaching the climax? No pun intended.
No. I have no idea where it's gonna go. I know where it can go. But that is in the control of the player.
That's always a good thing from a DM or a GM or whatever you want to call. Is that it is in the hands of the player.
Yeah. I mean, the way it's working for me is it is contained on Gordon Depot, one location, and so I can actually plan accordingly. So I don't have the nightmare that a GM might have, where you've got a whole world generated and the player could go anywhere, and then they can jump in a spaceship and go into space and go literally anywhere beyond that. Thankfully, I don't have that problem. It's just Gordon Depot, which is not a very large outpost, and I have a lot of history tied to that station that the players don't know about yet. So what's really fun is anything that Kurt comes across is going to be referenced later or seen firsthand by the players in the simulation when they're basically revisiting it, but several years in the past. I'd say about 6 or 7 years ago. So
Nice.
that'll be potentially fun for anyone who actually pays attention to the small details, any name drops or really just anything. But I don't know yet what Kurt's gonna come across. It's just I have a large library of things that could happen that will be relevant later.
And the last thing I've got written here, from my huge page of notes today, is the command token system. So Kurt's helping with that now.
Yeah, so Kurt's pretty good with just the numbers stuff. Um, And so I think pairing him off with Ramirez is going to be helpful to Ramirez. Kurt's been pretty good about going through anyway with the diamond market and trying to figure out where we're lacking in areas, particularly like a balance.
Yeah, that was the word I was about to utter, was balance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Another thing, like going into the balance, not just with the command tokens, but with the diamond market itself, is the possibility of looking in and really doing a whole lot of rewording for armors and weapons, just so that it's super clear that we have some form of perhaps a weapon triangle, or some sort of balance
like
between
Yeah,
kinetic.
kind of like the rock, paper, scissors.
Yes,
Yeah.
rock, paper, scissors between kinetic weapons and laser weapons and potentially explosive weapons. I
You
don't
mean
know.
something like adding filters?
Like what?
Adding filters, he said.
No, not filters, but just really defining what does what.
Yeah.
How protective is an armor, and what is that armor good for?
All right.
It's the same kind of system that Eve was built on, which there were like 3 different main causes of damage and 3 different main causes, forms of defense.
Right.
And it was basically the best ship out there was the one that was able to exploit that, the best, like the most commonly used weapon types from that. So there was always
Right.
and it's a hard thing to balance, and it's very frustrating for players who want to kind of build the ultimate, and it is never possible because there's always going to be, one side of the triangle is going to lurch if one side
Right.
is offensive.
Now,
So,
building that third leg of a triangle is a little difficult with the elite
Yeah.
system, because my third choice is explosive, and explosive is kind of like a special, I guess,
yeah,
where it screws up everybody. So it's like, well, that doesn't really fit in the triangle. So right now we only have 2 real damage types in this triangle, that somehow counter each other.
yeah. I think that's what it was in Eve. It was explosive, kinetic, and laser or energy. I think it was, or was it energy, kinetic, and I can't remember, but it was like 3 damage types.
Well, those are our 3 most common damage types.
Yeah, so it was based on that, and they set up a triangle, which was good because there's never a full awesome build. There's always a way to. It might not be the most commonly used type, but if you have the right type, you can always break the unbreakable ship.
Well, if I'm getting this right, explosive is not really that dangerous in elite, is it?
Yeah, that's the missile system that we have.
Yep.
Yeah, it's
Missiles are pretty tricky to use, in my opinion. Like, they don't work against shields, but they're pretty effective against a shieldless target. So I think I'll it's just gonna take some time. And that's one of those things that Kurt is doing, is just going through and not just with the damage types, but the weapon classes. We're kind of developing classes like SMGs is something I'm lacking. We've got a few pistol options, and then it just jumps straight into assault rifles.
Okay. By the way, for anybody who's not heard before, the command token system is the war game system that is based on an earlier iteration that we for the Baltic war, which was against some animals that had run amok, and that's now been developed into a full war system for the Prismatic Imperium. And that brings us to the end of analysis, and now it's into open discussion. Prismatic discussion. Prismatic discussion.
Well.
Prismatic discussion.
By Arkana, what's this? By who ruined?
What is that?
Surprise!
I've got hacked. No.
Hilarious.
That could have been a lot worse.
Who
That
by
could have been
Arkana did that?
Yeah, we need Jeff. We need Jeff doing that as well. Just you need a recording of all of us.
That's what, because the link looked different. Okay. Okay, whoever did this, I'm going to fine you.
I suspect I know who it was.
Yeah.
Someone ruined a publicly streamed official Prismatic Imperium Congress.
That was really exciting. Thank you.
Oh no, I thought it was fine. I had no problem with it. I thought it was funny, but I thought it was fine.
At first I thought that was being done live until I heard it repeating.
Yeah, no, it wasn't me.
In the name of the Congress, I'm going to find you.
So if other people want to join the discussion, they're more than free to do so. Looking at you, Bear. Or is he still hiding? Or is he
Which bear do we have here? We've got
Ophelia.
so many bears.
Yeah, bare feet.
Oh,
Yeah,
bare
we-
feet.
Yeah.
Because we got Untamed Bear and Rupee Bear.
Yeah, we do. We've got 3 bears. But 2 of them are growly grr bears. And one is like naked bear.
Naked bear.
Right, so does anybody want to talk about anything that we discussed in
I do want to talk about something that came up this week with Bear.
what do you want to
Barefoot
talk
here.
What do you want to talk about?
We really tried to solve the puzzle with the Liliths.
With the
They're like-
Liliths?
Who are the Liliths? Yeah.
What? Sorry, some
That's
background.
why everybody is so fascinated by a couple mindless characters.
The fact that they were just mindless characters, but so rich in mystery, and the fact that they all share the same name.
You're definitely overthinking this.
Everybody
It
loves
became-
sidekicks.
It's too hard to not overthink that. It's just very compelling, I have to admit.
Is this
Originally,
a role-playing thing? Is this a role-play thing?
it has yes,
It
is.
has bases within the game, but yes, there's now a roleplay element to it as well.
Oh dear.
He took a very casual approach to make his headcanon for the fact that he calls all of his pilots that he hires the same person,
Clones.
regardless of gender, regardless of how many of them there are. So it is. He describes them in our roleplay as the Liliths. And we have
Okay.
he Lilith as well.
That's you could headcanon that quite.
Originally, I jumped in on it with suspicion because I wanted to make sure he wasn't cloning people.
Yeah.
No,
You know how
they're
I
all
am.
different people.
Yeah,
all-
you know how I am. I'm like, if people are getting cloned, I gotta be like, all right, let's keep this within our reasonable lore.
Nope, they're all very different people, all
No,
equally
Now
useless.
I'm convinced he's got dark magic going on.
No, for me it would be one of those a little bit like the running joke I have with Mystler. Be one of those things that might have started by accident and then he just continued with it. And a lot of things actually do start that way. It's like an accidental reoccurrence a few times kind of becomes a thing. So maybe the first couple of pilots were just called Lilith and he just stuck with that. So yeah.
Well, until we get
Well-
a confirmation.
Well, if you would
never
like
know.
the whole story, Lilith initially was a real NPC pilot. She was the first pilot I ever trained up from harmless to elite, and I lost her in a Thargoid combat zone. So I've named all my other co-pilots Lilith in an attempt for them to try and live up to her.
Ah, okay.
That just makes
I'm
me
not that
sad,
far.
honestly.
Which, like I said, you were overthinking it.
Yeah.
That is a mechanic in Elite Dangerous I absolutely hate. The fact that you lose your pilots.
I like
But-
it. I like that there's something because
I'm glad you like it.
no, but there's very few like long-term consequences for death, and it's
Yeah, I don't like death.
consequences for death.
consequences.
I like that there's something that makes you want to avoid it, and it's not just. In fact, I wish there was a little bit more consequences for death.
So you don't like death, but yet so many characters of yours die.
No. I think a lot of players complain that my characters don't die. It's just- Like the plot armor and the yeah. No, I want to create the feeling that there is some vulnerability to the characters that I create. And I want players to feel like there is consequences for their actions, which there are, just not always does it result in death. But I
Yeah.
want to at least keep up that illusion.
I'd hand the roleplay more over to Mystler then. He's already killed one character and used the plot hammer a couple times already.
I think Mystler is doing a perfect job of.
I think he's doing a great job. That's not what I said.
No, he's killed one important character, and I'm sure that was set up for it. But now he's got this woman that survived, and this is exactly how NPCs end up getting created. From
Yeah.
my own experience,
I
Originally, I didn't even intend for it to have a name, and now I'm sitting here thinking about a backstory, and she might end up an NPC. I don't know yet.
yeah, Gabrielle Allison is supposed to have been dead in the season she was in. Or even more so, Spencer Isaac in the season that he was introduced. Nisa Nick ended up springing a trap and informing him of something the players had set up, and it was all set to go to kill him off along with his entire crew. And I had not anticipated him surviving the season, and then he has carried over for 3 more seasons after that. So he wasn't supposed to be an important character.
no,
Yeah,
it's
that's
also
just how it goes.
I played another game years ago, and me and a bunch of NPCs, we all attacked this tower, which was a big war. And after that, like the game systems took over, and there was just like this big battle, a huge battle between loads of NPCs. And one of my knights survived it, and that was like in 2007, and he's still in the game to this day. I mean, he's an important NPC now just because he survived that war just through sheer happenstance. Our side won barely, but there was like 2 NPCs survived. One was my knight, and the other one was some random. And he became important because of that. He wasn't set up to be what he became after, but he just survived the massive NPC war that we ran. It was awesome. Anyway, on to other things. The Golconda. I've read some criticisms about how it was handled. Most of the criticisms I've read so far and were in the early days with how it was handled, and the fact that there was a lot of misunderstandings and things like how did these guys manage to go past all these habited systems and not realize, and it was basically people just hadn't quite understood what was going on, and also there was some misunderstanding. Like basically, as we know now, the ship was found, the generation ship was found just outside of Earth space. It's not far; it's 172 light years away from Sol, so it's not traveled that far compared to the kind of distances that we jump today. But that's a really long. At sublight speeds, that's a really big distance. So a lot of the criticisms that I read early on were to do with misunderstanding what had actually happened and the technology involved. But one of the criticisms, and it's something that you touched upon, was why are these guys speaking English? Which is a fair point. It's one of the things that the Expanse deals with well, is language, and how language changes over time. In 1,000 years, they would speak something that would be very different. I can think of some reasons why they would still speak English. Most of that to do with the computer, because if they have voice-operated systems, they would be forced to speak some kind of standard English to continually operate the equipment that they have, especially if it's voice-operated. I'm sure there would be changes to it over time, but it might have forced them to keep on that. But it is an interesting point. Anybody else have any thoughts on the Golconda?
I will defend the English once again, just to expand on what you just said. It is a very contained environment. And I think language has an opportunity really to evolve because of population and difference in cultures and just different environments, and none of
Well,
that's being introduced on a mega ship.
well, language does change naturally. I mean, there are changes. A lot of them come through interactions with kids. Kids naturally mutate language. Some of it is corrected by adults. Some of it isn't, and a lot of changes occur through that. Language is something I know a little about. A lot of things, especially important words, they don't change very often. It takes a long time to get an important word to change. Like all the Indo-European languages say no or some variation of no. And then also in all Indo-European languages, the word mother is very similar
Actually,
across thousands of years. Yeah.
I think I would assume that the biggest changes in languages happen from cultural blending and people mixing.
Yeah, no.
And
No, sorry,
Golconda,
I
they
was
don't have
taking that.
So my
So, yeah, no, I was taking that out of the equation. I mean, if we take out cultural mixing and the effect from other languages, what things could impact how language changes?
the point I wanted to make is
Yes.
I'd actually not assume that the Golconda should have a new language evolved, but rather that the galaxy around it the language should have changed more than on the Golconda. So, like,
Oh,
as
for
if they
sure.
use a
Yeah.
language from the past and not from the future or their own thing.
Yeah. It'd be the equivalent. If they did speak a very similar form of English, it'd probably be more similar to like Old English compared to us, like Old English versus Modern English.
Yeah, that's one of those narrative things that I guess we should
A
be
lot of
thankful.
science fiction does ignore it. I mean,
Yeah.
they do work. They do if they do make a workaround like Universal Translator, or they just outright ignore it. Or was it Farscape? They had like the thing they infected people with, so everybody could understand each other. They do try to find a trick around it, or just flat out ignore it. I mean, I have seen that done as well, a lot in science fiction. Although we do try to be realistic, but yeah, the language is probably one of the more because I teach language and things. It is something that I'm interested in. But yeah, no, there are different ways that language can change. Cultural blending is a big one, especially English. English is just a mongrel language, just mixed from all different things. That's a big part of how we do. I mean, even to where I live in Sicily, and Sicilian is a mix of Latin, Italian, Arabic, Spanish, French, all these things mixed together to create modern Sicilian. But I don't have any big problems personally about how it's been handled so far. I haven't really dealt with it myself in the game, so if there are any criticisms, they may be valid. The ones I've read so far were, I think some people were a bit disappointed that they felt like the Golconda has been a recent addition to the game rather than something that was always there that has just been discovered. And I think that might be the most fair criticism I've seen. Although personally, I think it's fine. But and it's good to see these because there were thousands of generation ships out there, and I would have. Yeah, sorry, go.
Sorry, that's actually, I wouldn't call it a criticism, but that's always something I'm kind of fascinated by because I do subscribe to that idea that this was something that was just entered, and I'm curious how commanders find it. Like, especially, you can use this as the most recent example. You can use Thargoid barnacles basically as another. Like these pop up somewhere, and
yeah, but this one was
this
one was specifically found through local advertised that there was something strange going on, and somebody went and investigated and found it.
Okay, I missed that part.
In this particular case, that's kind of how that happened. Yeah,
I would just kind of assume FDev slips somebody a note and says, "Hey, you should go here."
Yeah, I do get your point. I think some of the things that were found hadn't, like some of the big things that were found early on in the first few years of the game, hadn't been in the game. Hadn't been slipped a note. These were things that had been in the game since launch, and it took people years to find them. And then there were clues.
Players are crazy. They would take the stars in just a trailer leak and map out where something was.
Yes. No, but these were things that were naturally found over time.
Yeah, so it's like if Frontier did a an update and they're like, oh, and we added barnacles in this update, like the players would find it just because of the 10-second trailer they'd throw out.
Yeah,
That's all they needed.
Yeah, you're right. They were able to map the sky based on the trailer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so they didn't even have to send like players a note in
Yeah.
game or anything.
I mean, a lot of but even then, I mean, a lot of the clues they left were ridiculous. I mean, these were things that your average player would never find. I mean, they were like you had to analyze the sound recordings to get an image and these kind of things, and it was ridiculous. The things, the lengths that the players went to, and it was great that FDev had put those things into the game. But again, I mean, who would even think of that? I mean,
I think that's a Braben thing. I
Yeah.
don't think we're still getting that kind of stuff anymore. I could be
Yeah.
wrong, but
that was ridiculous. I mean, there are things that in real life that I know that I would never try to apply to a game. So I would personally think, in this case wrongly, the developers wouldn't have gone that far. I mean, it might be a technique that I would use in a real life situation because I know that there are multiple layers to reality and things go beyond what I can see. Whereas I don't mean that in a supernatural way. I just mean in terms of science. But I would never think of applying my scientific knowledge to the game to find something because I wouldn't expect the game to respect that. And it was just amazing that Frontier did respect that depth, those layers to mysteries and to solving things.
The example I always like to use for that is the first person who discovered, Voyager 2 out in the Sol system, having to make all those calculations and
Yeah.
the trajectory of where it would have launched in the 1960s or 70s and
17.
find that where it would be in whenever it was discovered in 3303, I think it was.
Yeah. I mean,
Jeff,
that's how-
I hope you discover actual canonical ghosts next time you visit like space wreckage and you start running your filters of reality. I hope supernatural things come up for you. I know that would be in the game for me. If I was behind Elite Dangerous, there would be a supernatural element
Ooh. No.
very deep. So
No. I don't think that would be in that game. It kind of goes against.
I agree. I don't think it would be in the game. This game's trying to be too real.
Yeah, but it's been interesting to see them applying those different levels to the game, and it's kind of I've kind of been guilty of underestimating them more than putting too much. Like a lot of games, you put too much thought into what is behind it, and in this case, I haven't put in enough because they've been really respectful to the science and to the knowledge, and it's crazy what they put into the game. Especially in the early days, these little things. I know there are still things that we haven't found yet that have been there since launch. I'm curious as to what those are, or if we'll ever find them, because space is huge. I mean, we would never have found Voyager 2 without somebody sitting there and doing the calculations, at least under the old system.
I think most of our discoverers are retired now.
That hidden stuff, whatever it is, may be upgraded to new assets, depends on what updates are on the horizon.
Yeah.
For example, the Surara. Before these megaships were introduced, the Surara was just an Anaconda. Then it became the megaship it is today.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. I mean, they've done that as well with like some training missions. I mean, the training missions that we have now, a lot of those are the same as the ones that we had in Alpha. But they have updated the assets.
They're doing that with Raxla.
Probably. I think that's one of the things that bothers people about Raxla is that we know that Raxla that this is something that's contested, but I have seen Frontier say it. Raxla has been in the game since, so that means that it's before Horizons, which means it must be something in space. It couldn't be something on a planet.
Nah. It could have been a planet you couldn't land on. and
Yeah, but
and
it was
it can
something
evolve.
that was findable. It was something that was findable from the early days.
Yeah, now it's a point of interest with
Don't let
on a
the
planet.
Rexler madness come over you. I remember a time where I flew over 7,000 light years just because Spencer Isaac told me there might be something interesting there.
Yeah, I can't believe you did that.
Yeah.
Sin Karma right now is visiting all of the systems near Sol, looking for it. Looking for something very specific, though.
For Raxla.
Not Raxla.
Okay.
Looking for a system that doesn't show up in the galaxy map.
Well, dark systems, I have no idea if they're actually there. I suspect they're actually generated a lot. We've spoken in the past about assets that are in Stellaforge that don't have physical representation in the game. And dark systems are probably in there as well. They're probably being produced by Stellaforge, but they're not something that we can find.
I don't think it's a dark system.
No.
I think it's just a system that's missing from
You
the
know,
galaxy map.
there
I
are
don't-
systems where there are systems with just a black hole and planets in it.
Right, that would be a dark system, I assume. But I'm talking about a system that, to quote, I mean to look back at Star Wars Episode 2, a system that has been removed from the archive.
Okay. I see where you're going with that. Yeah, it's been removed from the archive. Yeah. Well, it is possible, but even then, if it was something that the Pilots Federation had done, because that's the kind of stuff that the Pilots Federation controls.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
We're at
Interesting.
59 minutes.
Yes. So I actually had another question.
Mm.
So with that, it's been an interesting episode. There's lots of things going on in the Prismatic Imperium. There's lots of roleplay, some of which I have to read up on to get some of the comments tonight. But that's it for tonight's episode. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next week.